ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prussia.
Hey, welcome everybody to this fine Monday morning. We are always looking at different ways that we can define our fight, whether it's personally, professionally, financially. You know, there's so many different ways that we can look at that. And I know in today's current day and age, everybody has a different fight. But the key really comes down to having clarity on what that fight truly is. And today I am here with an amazing individual who has led and paved his way in multiple facets. He is the co-founder and former CEO of BNG Team and Connect Booster, amongst many, many more. But looking at his accolades and his team's accolades is that BNG made the Inc. 5000 list 7 years in a row for the fastest growing private company in the nation. Not to exclude the fact that even more impressive if they received Inc.'s Best Workplace Award in 2019 and 2020. You know, not a lot of different businesses do that. And the fact that I know Brady Nash has made sure that his employees were also taken care of, because if you don't build your team, if you don't support your team, how do you expect things to move forward in life? So Brady, thank you so much for joining me on Define the Fight today.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I also got to give you a shout out because you were in the early years as a customer as well, back when you were operating your gym and came on board, which I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to help you out and work with your business, as well.
Well, you guys have done so many things, and like you said, support, right? And being able to connect with you in different facets and different chapters of life is really what it's all about, is seeing your growth and what chapter. So I know that with being the former co-founder and CEO of BNG, what does everything look like in your world, Brady?
It's, you try not to sound cliche and say, my life's a whirlwind, but it's kind of the way we design it. I've got 6 kids, my oldest being 13, my youngest is going to be turning 2 this week. And I love it. It's sometimes tough to juggle the logistics because I want to be at everything. You're trying to not hire someone to do everything. People are like, you could just hire someone to bring them to the games. I'm like, I know, but I actually want to be there with them. Right. So I think between that and then, really now since we sold BNG in September of 21, so we're coming up actually on the 3-year anniversary, talk about, it's been a life change because that was my life for 2 decades. And a big thing for me selling was really recognizing what I've learned working with entrepreneurs and very successful people of when they reflected on their life, what mattered the most. And when I meet with these 60, 70, 80-year-olds and, hey, what'd you do right? What'd you do wrong? Because that's who I worked with for 2 decades was entrepreneurs. When they had regret, the number one regret was relationship to kids. Second was spouse or ex-spouse, meaning it was relationships, it was time. It wasn't a business deal, it wasn't making more money. And so when I sat there and reflected, I'm like, Brady, you're in a unique position to, spend more time with your kids and really embrace that, even though my natural energy, I get all this, right, fame, all this fortune, all this stuff by doing the business side, which is great, but it's like nothing's more important than the opportunity to get to spend with my family. And so I really had to work on, I love doing that, but I also, turning down like more and more work because there's always more stuff I could do, but really just understanding the priority and making sure, I was following that up with action in my time has been a big deal. So, since then I've had to transition into, how do I continue to invest, protect the capital, but help other entrepreneurs? So, we've started a couple dozen companies or invested in. And so now I'm more on the strategic side, taking those, 2 decades of experience and trying to help them, but not be in the business every day. So I still have that flexibility to pick my kids up to school. I take them to school every day. I run them to every practice that I can, and hopefully be at all their games. And as they spread out, I'm probably be at a game and having one of their games streaming on a device next to me, probably, right? But I love it. And so now it's just trying to take a more active role, including, I'm wearing my capstone sweatshirt today, a new school that I felt like our family was called to help start, because I'm used to starting companies from the ground up and dealing with the scrappiness, and you got to be flexible. So we definitely felt called, and I really try to call myself out on, you say something, are you following that up with action? Meaning, I can tell my wife and kids I love them, but do my actions reflect that? Hey, Brady, you can say you're a Christian. A lot of people, hey, we're a Christian, we go to church, but I'm like, are you living that? Not just on Sunday, not just on Wednesday, but like in every day, are you integrating that? And so by doing that, I can always call myself out on how do I be better, right? And we're all hypocrites to varying degrees, but I think it's important to recognize and work really hard not to be, you know?
Yep.
And so for me, it was like, hey, Brady, you got an opportunity to tie in faith, tie in your family. I'm getting to, help out with the athletics at Capstone, which is I'm really passionate about sports outside of business. I love inspiring and helping people, the risk takers. That's why I love B&G was I was working with the entrepreneurs, the people that were taking all the risk, putting in all the work without any guarantee that it was going to work out. Meaning, you can have the best intentions, you can have the work ethic, and things can still not work out. Nothing's guaranteed. And that's why, you got to reward entrepreneurs. And that's why, when they finally make it and they're doing well financially, it's like it drives me crazy when people critique that because they took the risk and anyone can go and do it. If it's so great, then go and take the risk. Please, we need more entrepreneurs,
100%. 100%. When you look at entrepreneurship, like you said, nothing in life is a guarantee. And there's been many entrepreneurs, if you want to use the term, have failed, right? Or haven't been successful in the first, second, third round of different business. Right. Absolutely. So now it's like, but then they took that leap and are like, hey, I know I meant to do this. Maybe the timing wasn't in alignment. Maybe the mission of what was, they were seeking wasn't in alignment. So somebody had mentioned to me, I'm working on a book behind the scenes here, was work at peace pace. And I think that was the biggest thing that was like the aha for me is sometimes we try to force the ball to roll faster. Yeah. But sometimes it's not meant to.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I think different lessons that you've learned clearly with all of the different businesses and working with people, what are one of the, or two of the big pieces that you learned that like, wow, that kind of broadsided me?
Yeah.
But I really learned something impactful from it.
Well, I'll say this, and I know I'm sure we've got a wide spread of viewership, but I know you're a Christian, so am I, is what you're talking about. Sometimes it's God's timing. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt, I could give you all the knowledge and business stuff, and for sure that stuff matters, but there's no doubt that we got to where we were at because God's had his hand on it. And, we gave a lot. We believed in tithing and giving, and we gave when you'd look at the balance sheet, you'd like, you have no right to be giving. Meaning we were giving out of debt. I remember us taking out loans. I remember there's a organization I love. My buddy Nick Hall runs Pulse. He's an evangelist. And I remember feeling really called one time to donate money to them. And I literally took out a 0% credit card. By the way, I'm not telling everyone on here that you need to go and do that. I'm just saying me individually, where I was at in my faith, I felt extremely called to give. And there's a book I read called The Blessed Life by Robert Morris, and he talks about biblical giving and what it means. Essentially, it's the one area of the Bible God asks you to test him. He says, you can't outgive me, try to. And it's not just financially, it's in all areas of life. And the whole point is putting God first. You fear God more than the utility company, the mortgage company, your car payment. You put God first, and he promises to take care of the rest. It's easier said than done. Even tithing, the point, it's not about the money. God doesn't need our money. He wants our hearts. 100%. And so at a young age, when I was in a really rough spot mentally, maybe not so much spiritually, but I was just like, what am I doing here? Didn't really know. My mom gave me that, and it just changed. I'm like, God, you're in control. I'm going to give. I don't know how I'm going to make things work. And things just kept working out. I gave more. Things kept working out. And I really felt it was a test, if I'm being honest, Mariah. And this is something I don't think I've ever talked about on air before. But there was times, like I said, we were giving, and we had every right. We probably should have failed, and crazy things happened. Things came through in the 11th hour, and it multiplied. Even in our business for our buyout, what we got paid and what we did, we sold literally at the absolute peak of the fintech market right before everything probably dropped within half. Yeah. So you can say, is that luck? I like to think it was, divine intervention for sure. And so now, for me, it's always tough because I know when people go to business seminars, they want all what's the secret sauce? Hey, I can give you lots of strategies. I can give you strategies. I can help with you how to solve problems, how to solve issues. But in my heart, in my mind, I know that if God's not at the center of it, it's all going to be in vain. I'll give you examples. There's a lot of people I know that have had tremendous success, have made millions and millions. In fact, I've got friends that are billionaires. If they don't have Christ in their life, they're always looking. They're never satisfied. And I really believe that because God made us with a void in our heart that only he can fill. And it's good to be hungry. It's good to be motivated. I'm not
100%.
talking about not having motivation and being, things are good. I don't want to work that hard and God will take care of it. But God calls us to use our talents and gifts to honor him, actually. That's athletically, that's in the business world, that's being a parent. So I know that when God's at the center of that, he can use that to inspire people literally to be a stay-at-home mom or dad, a teacher, a coach, an entrepreneur, an athlete. So it's not about this, hey, you've got to go out and crush it and be this multi-million-dollar, or billion-dollar, mogul or politician. Maybe. I think we're all called for different things. Right. But I just realized when we're trying to find that happiness in things and stuff, it never hits. It's all temporary.
So when people are challenging, which I know a lot of people are right now, and today, the day and age of really feeling hopeless and questioning, and there's a lot of uncertainty that we're feeling from whether it's political, whether it's from environmental, whatever those things are, there's a lot of self-sabotage that comes into play too when people are trying to actively seek their purpose. What have you found, worked for you, and what insight do you have on helping them have clarity in regards to their vision? Yeah.
No, so I think one of the things that I was able to do that I try to help people to think through, because it's an exercise you can use the rest of your life, is really, it ties into what you're doing, which was not planned, by the way, defining the fight. But what are you fighting for? And I'm not here to tell anyone what their life's supposed to look like, because again, I believe God made us all differently with different talents and gifts and different purposes. But I do think so often people's trajectory is shaped by maybe their parents, society, a mentor, someone that is just like, hey, you should go do this. And they're doing stuff, they're running, they're rowing, but they don't exactly know where they're going. And actually, they haven't really thought about, let's fast forward that you actually achieved it. For example, how many friends do we know went and got college degrees and realized, I don't want to do this? Mm-hmm. Well, I would argue, you probably failed to do your due diligence on imagining you got your degree. Well, it's like I've had some people that went into teaching. It's like, wow, you don't make enough money. I'm like, well, you probably could have figured that out before you spent 4 years and got a teaching degree, right? I'm just saying we need to proactively work on where we're going and just imagine that you've got it, snap your fingers, just pretend it all worked out. Now what? Are you good? What does your life look like? When do you wake up? When do you go to bed? What's your family look like? And listen, life's going to throw curveballs. I'm not saying that we're not going to make adjustments, but I do think you've got to believe in where you're going and why, and really feel like that's worth fighting for. Because if you don't have your fight defined, you use your words, right? It's very hard to do the difficult things to have success now and about anything. You could say that in fitness. You can say that in entrepreneurship. I think you can even talk about marriages and people that haven't really defined what a healthy marriage is. And it's very difficult. You've got to, have that commitment to your spouse and to your family with the world pulling us in every direction and everything fighting for our immediate attention. I mean, everyone's got ADHD, I feel like, because it's like our pockets buzzing, the TVs are buzzing, everything, right? And so I really think you got to take the exercise in their life. When I talk with high school graduates, I'm like, let's just play things out. Let's just talk about what your life plan is. And it's amazing how many people haven't really sat down and played that out. Let's just make a story of, you go to college. I'm going to be a veterinarian. Awesome. That sounds great. I love animals. I want to help them. Cool. So let's play that out. And you start writing out their life. And in this process, some people are like, oh, yeah, this is absolutely what I want to do. And some people are like, actually, I'm not so confident in that. Okay, that's all right. That's why we're doing it. And by the way, your goals can change in life. When you meet someone, that can change your perspective. Having kids can change your priorities. It should change your priorities. Right. You went from not having kids to having kids. So I just think really having that dream, that's like, why are you going to wake up early? Why are you going to stay up late? Why are you going to be disciplined? Has to be something that is so convicting for you, it's going to drive you. I can't give someone a dream that's going to work for it. I kind of talked to you, before we were on the air, before I got into payment processing and B&G, my background was network marketing. what I loved about network marketing was it taught me about residual income, recurring revenue, but it really sold me the dream of financial freedom. That's what I was sold on. I was really good at sharing that dream, and people were inspired by the dream. But when it came to putting in the work, 95% of them, did we lose Mike?
No, we're good.
Oh, okay.
We're good.
95% of them would not do the work. Meaning they liked the idea, but when it came to actually doing the work, it wasn't they weren't gonna put it in, right? And we kind of talked about, imagine you could snap your fingers and have the best physique in the world. Actually, let's do this exercise for the people listening. Imagine you could snap your fingers and have the best physique in the world. How many of you, and I'll throw myself in that category, would say, like, I can maintain that now?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, where I'm at, I couldn't. Those people, that the amount of work that they do to maintain that, by the way, I'm not saying that that's a goal that you have to have. I'm just saying we look at things like, man, I want that. But when you realize the discipline of what you eat and how you work out is like, there's no way that sounds like a horrible punishment. It's the same thing on the business side.
Yeah.
I think people looked at my life, and I love my life. They're like, man, you've got a beautiful wife. You've got 6 healthy kids. You're in touch with your faith. I'm like, I love my life. But when you looked at those 20 years of what I did, the amount of time and discipline, I think most people would be like, that sounds terrible. Meaning the amount of discipline and work and dedication and unknown stuff that we went through. And I just think that's so often in life, right? Whether you see UFC fighters, they love to think of being on stage and being under the lights and people coming and cheering. But the amount of work it takes to train for that one fight that could last 1 minute or 30 seconds or 5 minutes, I mean, it's pretty wild.
It is. And the thing is, like you said, it has to be sustainable too.
Yeah.
But at the same point, when you're trying to sustain, like you're mentioning physique, and then you're talking about fighters, there's so many different stressors that people don't see, and how many ways that you're getting pulled. Yeah. So in that time when you're making the climb, so it's not all rainbows and unicorns. Let's just be honest, right? It really isn't. And it's hard because the reality is, when you own a business, when you're an entrepreneur, you can't shut that off, right? Yeah. When, as an employee, you can go in, know that you work 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever that may or may not be. You have probably a higher, capability of shutting off.
Yeah.
But when you're the individual, like, okay, all of my eggs are in this basket, I don't have necessarily the option of shutting off, because all of the passion and the purpose and the mission are in those eggs, right? Yep. And if they break, now what happens? So for you, during that time, trying to sustain, maintain not only your business, but your family and your faith and finance when you're trying to make that climb, what were some of the struggles that you encountered during that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of prayer, again, not that I'm trying to, shove this conversation as a religious conversation, but it's just true. A lot of prayer and belief that, God's going to take us through. And it followed up by a lot of work and activity, prayer and activity. We just weren't sitting there on the side of the road, waiting for him to come and save us, but it was trust in his provision, that if we stayed the course and we're doing these right things and making adjustments, that things would come out, and they did. But yeah, I mean, I had good business partners. We stuck together that were also, faith-filled, strong, Christians, and we rallied around each other. So I think you've got to have a good support group of people that you can really lean on, and they can pick you up, and vice versa. You're picking them up. So who you surround yourself with is a huge impact. I think, listen, what I've learned in success, so running dozens of companies and helping thousands of businesses, you start to see things that are, 80, 90% the same stuff of what it takes to be successful. And that's why I feel comfortable starting a new business. I realize if you're in insurance, you got to have an insurance expert. If you're in real estate, you better have someone that knows real estate. If you're in payments, you got to know payments. But that's maybe 15, 20% of it. The other 80% is the same tools to be successful to build any company. How you build culture, how you hire good employees, how you keep good employees. How do you have a system of communication to identify issues, resolve issues? It's one thing to talk about goals, but do you have a plan to actually achieve those goals and accountability around it? So I've realized the formula in most businesses, 80% of it's the same. The other 20% is the unique industry product knowledge. You've got to have that good leader that understands that business, has a passion for that industry or whatever it is. The rest of the stuff to scale, it's very much the same types of formulas, right? How you build brand loyalty, how do you build raving fans? Well, you treat them well. You take care of them. And so much of my opportunity comes from doing things right in one area and then opportunity comes to me in another area. If I start a new business, I've got people lining up in that customer because of a reputation, because they've worked with us in other areas and they trust us. Well, we wouldn't have that if we took advantage of customers, if we messed them up on service or pricing, or we didn't answer our phones when there was a problem. It was like, hey, I trust Brady that if something went wrong, he's going to take care of it. That's important to me. And those are the things I'm trying to teach my kids. You talk about, helping them find their way. We're talking about Sky, and I want her to learn some Brazilian jiu-jitsu. She's not going to do travel basketball this season. So, she'll be lining up to work with you or whoever you put her in touch with because, she wants to be a missionary. And I'm like, geez, first option, obviously, she's in a situation to run, but I want her to be able to protect herself as much as possible. And how do I help her in that journey of wanting to go out and share Jesus with people?
What do you see with helping coaching, so on and so forth, moving forward that might be lacking that parents can help guide their children to be not only great athletes, but also humble ones? Because I think that's a missing piece right now.
Yeah, I think, that's a great point. I think when you talk about raising our kids and some of the stuff, I'm going to talk about my kids, and I think some of the things that we're doing more that's community-based to accomplish what our goals, which is how do you raise these kids to be good human beings that will help them in life. A big thing for me is, I pay my kids to read books, right? Certain books that I approve. I pay them 10 cents a page. So a 250-page book, $25. So once they get to a certain age where they can competently read, I would say good books, I'll define what that is. Like there's some, Keila Maddox is an author, is a kid author actually, that wrote like how to be a positive kid, how to, make friends and, have influence, which is essentially, he wrote all these adult books and said, why is there not a kid version of these books? Like Dale Carnegie and, Tony Robbins, a lot of these books. I'm like, oh, this is so great. Like, how do you deal with siblings and how do you make money as a kid and not lose your childhood? So, you can go on Amazon and find these books. So I started them with that. They're like 70-page books, pretty easy to read. But I think it's so important to hit them at a young age because they're developing who they are and how they think and how they process. So I would argue right now between that, at a young age, the faster you can get to them to start building their principles and how they see themselves and identify themselves as, am I a good kid? Am I a nice kid? Like it's so important for them to believe that, themselves. And how do I give them good, access that's not just dad and mom preaching to them? I think anytime you can get a third party, a stranger, like I could try to teach Sky some moves, even if you told me what to teach her, it's going to come better coming from you, Mariah. Like we all of us coaches
voices,
know that,
right?
Yeah.
So if you're always hearing the same tone,
yep,
you're going to, kids or adults will hear it differently, or it's worded a little bit differently where it connects. And you're like, okay, I got it.
Different voice adds maybe, I don't know if legitimacy is the right word, but it helps reinforce stuff. Mm-hmm. And so for me, teaching my kids and reinforcing values, being a kind person, having emotions is fine. It's good. God made us with emotions. But how you choose to respond with those emotions matter. And, part of the thing that I know we're working on at Capstone, as athletics is what's a good culture look like? What are we trying to get out of it? Yeah, we want to be competitive. Yeah, we want to try to win the game. But is that the most important thing? I would say no, not trying to shy away of, no, it doesn't mean we don't care about winning. I think there's two extremes. You got some people that make sport their God, which is, I don't agree with. I think that's wrong, and it creates a super toxic culture for kids and families and everything. But then the other extreme side is they can demonize it and like, well, if you care too much about sports, or if you have passion, or if you're dedicated, that's a bad thing. And I don't agree with that either, because I think sports is an opportunity for a kid to learn how to work hard, to deal with adversity, and to learn how to emotionally deal with the things that happen, whether they're the star or a kid trying to get playing time, or you're dealing with teammates you don't necessarily like. Well, we all know when you grow up, that's kind of the same thing. You might have to work with people you don't exactly want to be best friends with, but you got to learn how to respect each other and how to navigate that. That's an example of what sports creates for kids. Dealing with a coach you might not always like or agree with. Well, let me tell you, when you grow up, you're going to have to deal with some of that too. Or even realizing that even if you're the leader, now you're the person everyone's looking at. And how are you going to be a good leader? And what does a good leader look like? Right? And so what I love about youth sports is it's a platform to simulate real life events that will translate into anything else that they're doing. So how do we navigate and guide them to have those experiences so we can help them learn how to deal with them in a healthy way. And it's kind of like you want your kids to get some scrapes and bruises. You don't want them to lose a limb.
Right.
And you could argue, I don't want them to break an arm, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if they had to do that. Yeah, it'll heal, right? It's you learn from this stuff. And listen, and for me being in, a college dropout, all my lessons were, trial and error. We made lots of mistakes. Now we were quick to rebound. What did we learn? How do we make adjustments? And, you fail forward.
Yep. And
so for me, how do we teach these kids to have passion for a sport, but not, when you lose, not self-destruct.
Right.
When you can care about the game, you can lose a game, and you can go and say, Mariah, like you got to stay. You're so good, but I'm going to work hard. We're going to get you next time. But congratulations. And be able to have the emotional maturity. No, it's normal for a kid not to instinctually have that. Mm-hmm. But this is an opportunity as coaches in a community and parents to work with our kids, because that will bode well for them in life. How do you respect the refs? Yeah, refs are going to make bad calls because we're all human. If you and I were reffing, we'd make some mistakes too. Not because we were trying to, but because it's a lot of those things might be a little, debatable. Well, this is an opportunity for them to grow. So for us, when I look at schooling, I look at education, I look at sports, it's just not going through motions. It's how do we make sure we're being intentional, that we're getting the value out of it that matters. And when certain kids thrive and they love it and they want to go play college, you celebrate that. That's great. And maybe every generation you get one that gets to go play professional. Awesome. We're going to celebrate that. But everyone can experience and get values, life values from participating, whether you're a starter, you're coming off the bench, or you're cheering, or whether you're the bookkeeper or you're part of the team. How can you contribute? And listen, in society, not everyone gets to be the star.
Well, and I think when we look at athletes, but also looking at the parents, when you have athletes that are buying in, right? And when I say buying in, actually, like, yes, I love this. They're absorbing it and they're learning and they're growing. It's important to understand that parents also can be learning at the same point, because what I've found and what I've seen generationally and the different shifts from when I was coaching to what you're seeing now is that you can see parents that are belittling other kids that are playing on the court. All of these different, but it transfers, right? So if a parent is talking poorly about another athlete who is a child, right? Because they're still not 18, what is their child learning? But then at the same point too, how can a parent address their child if they're not seeing a lot of playing time? What are some of the things, like by asking their child questions instead of assuming it's always the coach? Yeah. It's like, okay, what role do you have in this? And I think that will help help them grow, but it also takes some of those stressors down too. It's like everybody has an option and an opportunity to grow here. And we need to make sure too that we're not taking coping skills and strategies away from our kids where the parent is instantly the one that is hounding, whether it's a superintendent or the coach. I don't agree with those factors.
Yep. I think the problem is, and listen, the number one problem in any business is communication. Absolutely. If you have an organization of any size, is communication, poor communication, no communication, negative communication. It's a communication issue. And I actually think one of the big problems that needs to change in youth sports is the communication between coaches and athletes, and even with the parents. I mean, I'll even say, if everyone can level up and understand why their kid isn't playing, let's talk about it.
And be honest.
And be honest. And listen, a lot of coaches, I'll be honest too, sometimes they're donating time. The pay that they get, it almost barely warrants covering their expenses with coaching. It's very much a passion thing. We need more people to do it. So you got to take that into it. But it's also them shying away from that contact or communication with kids. I've seen it, and with the parents. And it's like, hey, don't discuss, don't do it. Well, in theory, that sounds great, but I still don't actually think we're getting the full experience, because in my mind, if you could equip coaches to have that communication, you can create a better experience for these kids to learn about, body language, energy, eye contact. You hustle in and out of the huddle. I was teaching 5th and 6th grade kids last year, and some of the kids, I said, great kids, great families, but they had some bad habits with not making eye contact, looking away. I said, I don't know if you intended or not, but what you're telling me is what we're saying isn't important.
Or you're not interested.
Do you realize that?
Yep.
I said, these are the opportunities now to help you in life. I'm like, forget about the basketball game. That's one thing. Like, this is a life thing.
Well, and the thing is, too, is we have to look at our level of communication and how much it's changed. We didn't have cell phones, or I didn't. I know that you're
No,
younger than me.
I
but-
was 18 when I got
All right. Well, we didn't have cell phones where we actually had to make eye contact and speak to the individual, where now we're in generations of eye contact is down and at a screen where it's not vocal or verbal communication. It's, oh, well, I'll just text and respond. So there's a lot of learning curve when it comes to communication and how to instill and create different ways to look at it, but then also show and demonstrate the importance of, hey, if you want to be an effective leader, not just on the court, but in life, you have to have the ability to have eye contact, to listen, to understand, instead of to just be ready to react. And I think that's a big thing that's going on in the world today, is that everybody is so reactive instead of like, okay, where are you coming from? We spoke a lot about work and what you've overcome and what you've done in your life, and clearly your faith and also your family are your key components, are, what you look for and help fill your life. But when it comes to kids sports, it's the same. It's helping kids define what their values are, but then also teaching them effective communication skills. And I know a lot of individuals right now, whether they're trying to balance family and work, they're looking at all these different things. And it is a struggle. It really is. And I think the sense of guilt never really disappears. But for individuals to become whole is defined by them. But at the same point, we all have our different beliefs. What are some different pieces that you would say to individuals, again, that are listening today, to really take home, to drive home on, like, okay, these are areas that I definitely want to work on? You mentioned some books too, that if you want to share those, because I know as a parent, like, I was like, oh, I didn't know about that book.
Oh man. Yeah. There's so many, there's actually some I was just, why am I drawing a blank on it? I literally, Sky's reading it right now. I think it's the Purpose Driven Life.
Yep.
That's pretty phenomenal.
That's a great book.
That's a great one. The best business book I'll always recommend, because it's got tangible qualities, is Traction by Gino Wickman. And it just talks about a visionary skill versus integrator, but it really just is a great operating system I use it in my life, Brandy and I, in our family, of how we have our goals. What do we want our family to look like in 10 years and 3 years and 1 year? Let's talk about it. Let's communicate and write it down. And then are we doing the things that match up with what we said matter? And if they don't, we got to change what we're doing, or we got to change our expectation because we're set up for failure. It's like saying, I use health and because I feel like it relates to most people. It's like having a health goal, but saying, well, I want to lose 30 pounds, but I don't want to give up pizza and donuts, and I really don't like working out. Well, that's fine. You can eat those things, but then you probably don't match up with the goal you have. So you got to change your goal, or you got to change what you're eating, like one of the two, because right now you're set up for disappointment, right?
Right.
Like, and it's the same thing, I think, in most things. Is we talked about defining it. The point, you need to define it, because then you can go backwards in the math. You have where you're going, the equals, and then you have an honest assessment of where you're at today. So those are the two given, right? You can say where you're at today, and then now you define where you want to go. Now in between's the math problem. It's like, if 1 is where you're at and 5 is where you want to be, well, what's the math problem? Well, it's 4. And I'm simplifying, but it's essentially saying now you can go define what that number is to get to what that equals is. What does it look like? I think the big thing that I would tell people, and what I'm trying to do with kids, is what are the defining things that you see in successful people? What are the qualities? It's, they don't have a victim mentality. It doesn't mean bad things didn't happen to them. That bad things happen to people that it's not their fault at all. But you have to control what you can control. You have to focus on what you can, because that's the only thing that's going to move you forward. So it's not, like I said, saying that, bad stuff happens to people. I mean, all the time, it breaks our heart. But what do they do? And if you've seen those people, because they're a lot of times the best speakers that have gone through great tragedy. I know you have some of that on your own personal side. What did you do with it? Some people you can shrivel up into a ball in a corner and people can empathize. Yeah, I see why they're doing it. But also some people use that for their strength.
Right.
And some of the strongest people I've ever met came from great tragedy and use that to drive them forward. And so it's, how do you teach kids and people to take any challenge in your life and use it as a motivation? Take a negative and turn it into a positive. It's a skill to learn. I look at, like, why are there certain people you like? Why do you like them? It's their energy, positivity. Is it, you trust them? Maybe you have the same sense of humor, some of these things, but like, start to look at, who do you like? Who do you respect? What are the qualities in them? And, you know, I had this, we don't have enough time now, but there's this exercise I take kids through. Like, if you had to define your best friend, if you could, like, if we had a printing machine, you know, with today's technology, maybe we're not that far away. But if you could print out your best friend, what are the qualities you would put into them? You know, and I'd ask kids, this is a group of 5th and 6th graders, and the number one thing, the first thing said was nice. I guess you're going to have a best friend. You want a nice best friend. That's a good one. The next one was trust. Yeah, I just want to be able to tell them secrets that they're not going to go and gossip and tell other people. So you want someone that's nice. You want someone that's trustworthy. Like, what's next? I think they said it was like encouraging, respectful. I can tell one kid was maybe looking at his friends like, yeah, they come over to your house and like they don't wreck your stuff. They don't wreck your parents' stuff in your household. They're respectful. You know, encouraging was like, hey, you don't make the team. They're encouraging you to keep trying out, you know. So when you look at these things, it's the same thing of like, who do you want to hire? What are the qualities? Well, hardworking. You want to be able to trust them. Integrity. Are they going to show up? Are they going to do their job? You know, willingness to learn. Dependable. Okay, what are the qualities you want in someone you'd work for? Well, it's nice. Like trustworthy. I want to trust my boss who I'm working for. You want to respect them, being dependable. Well, you start looking through these qualities. It's pretty much in anything you want. Hey, who do you want to marry? What are the qualities you want in somebody you're going to marry? Well, I want them to be nice to me. I want them to be nice. Yeah. What else? Well, dependable. You know, maybe they have ambition, right? Same thing. You don't want to hire someone. You want to be friends with someone that has some ambition. So these qualities are truths in almost anything you want to do in life. Who you want to be friends with, who you want to marry, who you want to work for, who you want to hire. So learn these qualities and start getting better at them. You don't want to be friends with someone you can't trust. You don't want to hire someone you can't trust. You don't want to work for someone you can't trust. You don't want to marry someone you can't trust. So don't lie. Stop lying. If you've got a lying habit, solve it, because it's never going to help you. It's only going to hurt you. Be kind. Be nice. We all have difference of opinions and beliefs, and that's okay, but you can still be kind. Yeah. You know, so these are the things I really want to instill into my kids. I want to instill into the communities and the kids that, you know, we affect and all the different organizations. You know, Bio Girls is going to give them a shout out. I love them and what they do for young girls, you know, and helping them and just belief in themselves. And so it's just trying to, I think we identify these things, but we don't always do the best job of following through and putting action. And so I'm always trying to, what's the next thing? And in Mariah, you know, in our last minute here, I just want to say you truly impress me, and I've seen your journey, you know, from being around you for the last decade plus, and you putting your talents and efforts to inspire not just, you know, young kids, but boys, girls, adults, and everything that you do. Like, you're one of those people that sets the tone and picks everyone else up. And I can tell you from experience, sometimes you never know who's listening, that one time down the road later, that your conversation will have changed their life. It's happened to me. I've seen it happen to other people. Sometimes I haven't even met them. Like, man, I should go try to find them because their talk hit me at the right moment. And maybe it wasn't the whole thing, but that was the straw that got me to finally take action.
And I appreciate that, because I know that you clearly have done the same for me and a lot of other individuals, not just within our community, but throughout the nation, right? And that's really what it's all about, is recognizing that in life, our mission is larger than ourselves. And, you know, talking about the different qualities is making sure that you are taking a strong look at yourself in the mirror and what are you bringing to the table? And if you're not bringing it to the table, how can you actively work on those skills to do so? So, Brady, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and then also to all that you're doing with kids, the community, with Capstone. I mean, it's always a pleasure having a conversation with you.
Great being with you this morning.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today on Define the Fight. If you are looking at more to empower youth to lead from within, check out definethefight.org, where it really is all about our children. So stay safe and go out there and define the fight.